this work. And the decision was taken that you collect grain, you collect cassava, you collect flour, you collect beans together, so that when the day for cleaning comes, only a few people go and do that work. That collect the other side of the river, which was also interesting in December.
Dr. James Okok, I was waiting that Dr. James was going to be critical on what he has mentioned about the historical evolution of the foreign policy, the culture of where we came from as a liberation movement, and I was expecting that you would demine, you know, the origin of the foreign policy from the perspective of the movement, the SPLM, and the establishment of the foreign ministry in 2011, as you clearly stated. I knew it was going to be very difficult, so I want to congratulate you that you have not demined that. It would have been very bad. The second point is really the Ministry of Foreign Policy is the second line of defense after the Ministry of Defense. And the question was to be the Ministry of Foreign Policy of the government of the Republic of South Sudan, why have they not performed well during the senseless war? I wish that question was to be asked, and then we look at it. And also, attempt to also look at the non-state actors, like the SPLM in opposition. They have also launched what they call foreign mission abroad. And so these two comparative analysis on what the government is doing and what the SPLM in opposition is doing, could it be really the merit of what have caused a lot to the government of the Republic of South Sudan or not? That was one area that I was expecting to look at it. The other area is the area of theory and practice. We have talked nice about definition of diplomacy. We have also talked nice about types of diplomacy. But in actual fact, what does it mean to us here in this country? You know, what does it, what is it really in reality? What is the culture of the people of South Sudan, as mentioned by Ambassador Steve Mundu? Now, my question, which I was also expecting in theme of the discussion, we have talked about the role of diplomacy in promoting. The underlying word here is in promoting the recent signed peace agreement. Really, what are the, you have discussed about the key recommendations, which I have also looked at them. But really, the signed peace agreement and the mission, the new mission of the Ministry of Foreign Policy, how is it going to look like? Is it still going to look like a crowded one? Are they going to have a new direction in promoting this particular peace, in developing the foreign policy? That was one area that I was really looking forward to see it and see how we can benefit from the discussion. Otherwise, I would want to raise your presentation.
And revocations of foreign policy. If we want to contextualize it, then the question, which is now in our hands, it goes back to what Ambassador Stephen Wundu have said, developing a national interest, promote a foreign policy. We have now an issue at stake, which my brother Deng have just asked. There's a tug of war. We are a member of international organizations, starting from IGAD, AU, UN, who have mediated the peace agreement. And we still believe the peace agreement was imposed on us, which contradict our membership to be a member of these organizations. Now, the question that I'm asking, using the public diplomacy, which is containing the centers, the trade centers, media, business, if we use the public diplomacy to formulate our strategy of how this peace agreement to be promoted as a commodity of the South Sudanese to be sold out by having an ownership of this peace agreement? What is the strategy required for us to formulate so that the foreign policy pick it? It's a question that I want to ask, and thank you.
Thank you.
Regarding the statistic that Dr. James came up with, I wonder whether these statistics could also be will reach to that. The second thing is regarding foreign policy. Actually, as diplomats, if there are no guidelines that guide diplomats to react accordingly to regional, international issues, then it has now become individual business that you just react to things according to what you understand as an individual. But foreign policy is very important guideline so that they guide you on what you can respond to any issues that are regional, international, so that you can exactly reflect the policies of the country. Again, who are our allies, regionally, internationally, and why? Why are they our allies? What are the common interests that bring us together? They cannot be just based on historical burden that Dr. Ambassador Moses talked about. They should be reflecting the realities of our situation inside. So I agree with what they all said, and there are a lot of, but I would like to give also a chance to others sometimes.
Thank you. Pass it on to Christina. And I want to talk about the capacity of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as the diplomats that are stationed in different locations and here. First thing I want to say, there's need for reforms within the ministry, and there's need for training of independence to prove to the world that South Sudan is well off given its independence. And he said, in 2011, South Sudan child mortality was 92%. Now in 2012, it's 52%. What this means in lay term is that in 2011, for every 100 South Sudanese children that were born, 92 of them were dying. So we're left with 8. What this means is that our diplomacy, it's not necessarily doing what it is doing because of the capacity. And as such, you really need to reform the ministry. You need to begin with the name. What's with international cooperation? What else do you do as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs if you don't cooperate internationally? I think there's need for us to begin there in the name. They say, don't judge the book by its cover, but actually you could do a whole lot of judging with South Sudanese covers by just looking at those. And so there's need for reforms within the ministry. Capacity is an issue. Majority of the diplomats are not necessarily resourced skill-wise.
That is the issue. But I want to start with what Rob said. For us to have this commodity called peace as ours, and given the fact that the president really managed to sign the agreement, and he called upon the people of South Sudan to support him in implementing it. But I think importantly, the very fact that our parliament unanimously, without reservation, ratified this agreement. So it is very important for us to say this is our agreement. It is not an imposed agreement. Whatever happens, that's it. But it is our agreement. And we have to own it, to be our commodity. And it is that is the starting point. And it is that commodity that will shape now our foreign policy. By the way, I want to remind you that the International Day for Peace, the theme of this year is partnership for peace, dignity for all. And I want to start with this partnership. We lost partnership during the war with all our key partners. And it's a fact. We lost our dignity. And it is a high time now, what can we do to forge new partnership with our partners? And this is what I thought that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs should start from that starting point. A strategy of how to forge partnership around peace so that we can restore our dignity. I heard that our delegation went to New York, the way they were received, it was not that very good. And I said, it is natural. But let us use this peace to be a starting point for us to have a new image to our country. And I think when we talk about the partnership, and then let us talk about the issue of peace, I think somebody mentioned that key critical neighbors, I think being a landlocked country with bad neighbors, it is a challenge. I'm one of the people believing that it is a high time for us to have forged new relationships on the basis of peace with Sudan. Because Sudan is becoming so critical for our, together and also with Uganda. Imagine that South Sudan to emerge, to be a catalyst for peace in Sudan, rather than be actual Sudan seen to be helping us in peace, but having their own business. But just change that attitude. What can we do in order to help Sudan to have peace? And I think we have every capabilities to do that one. So I think that's what I want to say, that the Minister of Foreign Affairs to come with a new strategy for peace.
I think that part and defining issues. So the issue is the question of, I'm not looking for numbers, but rather quality. So we should not just say there's no capacity or quality in the Minister of Foreign Affairs. There is. The problem may be what I always say, capacity utilization. Because there are also people, two of them, they're already demonstrating, and I know others. So we should play down this question of the ministry week.
Good time, and this discussion is timely because we need now to revamp our foreign policy. So that next time we don't see perhaps the Minister for Information saying different things, and the Chief of Staff saying different things, and maybe the Minister of Foreign Affairs waiting now to say different things. So there should be much coordination within the stakeholders in South Sudan foreign policy, and this is a very important issue. The other second point is the issue what's going to happen when the government is going to be formed in December. Dr. Lual, the other day in our forum, Ebony Center, the Development Policy Forum, challenged us to be able to think critically on how the ministries will be shared. And you were giving a very critical plot of saying if the government, the SPLM-IG take defense, perhaps the SPLM-IO perhaps will take interior, and perhaps maybe the former detainees may take foreign affairs, or perhaps the other political parties. And therefore, we need to think that way, what's going to happen if the government is formed, so that it's not that if foreign affairs is taken by other political parties, then does not mean that the government, the SPLM-IG, will not support it. It has to support whoever takes that docket. And therefore, we need to look at those reforms within perhaps in the next new down of the implementation of the compromise peace agreement. And I think the coordination part of it is very important. And more or less, the issue of the training, the University of Juba is there. They could be able to help to build up the diplomatic school, because we've been hearing about school for a very long time. It is a high time now to have the young diplomatic school built and resource with the University of Juba and even Ebony Center and the others institutions to be able to help our diplomats, even within the region and beyond. And I think we'll move forward. Thank you very much.
Pass it on
to evaluate and see how Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been performing in this period of 10 years, because don't talk of 2011. There has been institution that has been working on foreign relations since the time of SPLM. We were having a Secretariat of Foreign Affairs. It was working effectively, and Stephen Wundu is one of them. And after the CPA, there were regional cooperation, which is also talking about foreign policy. So 2011 is formalization of Ministry of Foreign Affairs to a level of sovereignty, but not because there has not been thing that has been done. Now, if you look at this, have we really worked well, or have we done well in the past 10 years? And if not, then what is that we are looking for? Because the nature of South Sudanese here is that when they are needed to talk issues, they pretend because of so many reasons. Some of them are fearing their position and all that. Have this presentation you are now giving, did you try to discuss it within your ministry? Because all what you have made are things that should have been heard by those who are in decision making. Because none of these people will not make any effect. Secondly, I think there is a big problem here. Foreign affairs does not end with us. This ministry will go down to generation. Then if it is not well established, we will be blamed for. And therefore, what is happening is that we are like people who are just passing and does not want to put things right. So, in actual fact, we have not done well in the last 10 years. Simply of two reasons. One, everybody wanted his relative, his cousin, and you name them, to be in a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Whether they are qualified or they are not qualified is none of his business or our business. This is one. Two, there is a naked tribalism, a very naked. It has no clothes. The deployment in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs does not reflect the diversity of South Sudanese. And if I'm wrong, you cross-check.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we have not done well. Do something else. Thank you.
Congratulate the presenters and the discussers for being frank and basic. Particularly the first presenter did point out that they were not being given opportunity to be given the opportunity and the platform in the ministry to present such kind of ideas. I think we should have taken note of that. So it means there's a problem within the foreign ministry with regards to its own staff being open in terms of discussing their own ideas and putting forward ideas and coordinating, whether it is called Ministry of International Coordination, within itself is not coordinating itself. That's one point which I want to just draw attention that is a fact that they have been very frank about it. And having been given this forum, I think it is incumbent on us that we need to give them the kind of strength and courage not to shy away within their profession, to put their ideas across, whether to the minister or to undersecretary, the government of national unity after the CPA. Now, very interestingly, Ambassador Wundu in his discussions said that they were being forced to project a policy of Arabism, and Sudan being an Arab country. And he pointed out a number of ambassadors who were there serving in that ministry under Dr. Lam. Now, my question basically is this, that with regards to those diplomats, South Sudanese diplomats, and which I know very well, some of them were later on, after independence, got incorporated into the foreign ministry. Now, those ambassadors, I'm sure, had already gained the experience, leave alone the fact that they were projecting the wrong policy. But it is a policy. Now, how have these seasoned ambassadors of Sudan utilized by the foreign ministry in order to be able to train the incoming young generation? That's one question. The second question is, it is puzzling me always, when we used to be in Khartoum, when Omar al-Bashir made his coup and established his policy of Islamization, a vigorous Islamization. And one of the adjuncts, and perhaps the saying, which used to be projected by Khartoum in its foreign policy, was a simple statement. And I could not understand. Up to now, in fact, I could not find a Sudanese diplomat to explain it to me. Maybe Dr. Lam can help, and Dr. Wendu. I mean, Ambassador Wendu. And the statement goes like this. Sudan's monologue is Sudan's dialogue. And you heard this is being repeated all over whenever they are talking about dialogue. Now, monologue and dialogue. I mean, two contradicting things. How can you explain to us,
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, thank you.
Ambassador Tony.
Yeah, just add a few comments from the Norwegian experience. Norway is a small country. We are rich, but we are a small country. And when you're small, you need good friends. And you need to build that relationship over time. I think that's very important, to build the confidence and trust over time. And that is why we in Norway have a very consistent message in our foreign policy. Even though government is changing, the foreign policy is discussed in the parliament and it's kind of owned by all the political parties. So even though the government changes, the foreign policy is very little changes in the foreign policy. And that's important, as seen from the Norwegian history. The other thing is that, as been said here, it has to be based on domestic policy. That means that it's not only the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that is doing foreign policy, it's also the different other ministries, like the Ministry of Finance. When they participate in meetings in IMF, they represent Norway. It has to be a consistent message. And that is also why there is very much discussion within the ministries. What is the Norwegian positions of different things? The other line ministries, they are included in that discussion. Another thing that I would like to share is about perception. Because Norwegians tend to think about themselves as Norway is perceived as chef and such. Very important part of the embassy's work is to check. How do other governments and other peoples look at us? Is it the same? And if it's not the same, and it's often not the same, then our task is to bring that message back to our headquarters, and then we have to make adjustments. And that's very important. We have to listen to how other people and other nations look at us. Because if we don't, we will not be able to build that confidence and trust. And then third and last thing, and that is that we see that more and more of the discussion and the domestic politics and policy in Norway is not decided in Norway, it's decided other places. And that is why it's so important to participate in all these multilateral organizations. in the UN, in the regional organizations, to really put emphasis on those things and to build bilateral relationship to be able to have an influence on what is going on. That's just what I wanted to share. Thank you.
The costume. So maybe one of the recommendations for those who have not yet spoken, maybe the political parties later on, is to have a blueprint for foreign policy in the transition period, which have to be agreed outside before the formation of the government. Professor Patricia.
My brief remarks, I should thank the DPF, because the DPF is one of the founding fathers or founding mothers of the School of Public Service. Our first board of advisors was drawn largely from volunteers from the DPF, two of whom are with me today. The Honorable Dr. Luther Minoja, who's the chairman of our now Board of Trustees, and Honorable Comrade Coel, who is the vice chair of our Board of Trustees. The School of Public Service is up and mobilized. We are now offering classes through a day track and an evening track, graduate, one-year postgraduate diploma and a two-year master's degree. We have about 50 students. Again, we began classes in August. That's phase one of our mobilization, but phase two of our mobilization is to begin to develop certificate and short courses and customized programs. And there have been three ideas that have been proposed to us for customized programs. The first is a program for members of parliament. The second is a program for senior executives within the ministries. And the third is a program for diplomats. So this is a very timely discussion for us. We have done some thought on it, but I think we need to do a lot more thought on it and some additional planning. I would propose that perhaps we meet with the new undersecretary and a small group of people to sketch out what that program might look like, both in terms of how it's delivered and in terms of the content of what is covered. But I think it's a very exciting opportunity and now a very important window that has opened up for us. So I look forward to continuing that discussion.
And I hope that...
I'm hungry after all this presentation. I remain hungry because of the wealth of the expectation. This item seems to be important, and I was thinking, what is the follow-up of this? Really, when you work backwards, that Ambassador Stephen Wandu defined the need or the origin of foreign policy. And Ambassador Moses Akol described the issues involved in foreign policy. And Dr. Okut, I think, to me, my perception described how our foreign policy is working. And important as it is, I don't really know how it goes on from here. How it goes on from here, because for some time since independence, before independence, we were told that no, don't discuss anything because this may threaten Jalaba. We wait until after referendum. And since the referendum and since independence, we have not had a national policy coming from war. It will be going to be a national policy of peace and social transformation, because it will derive from what Ambassador Wandu has said. Having defined what the need is, then you come and build the pieces. What we have done the last 10 years is that we create a structure, we feel it, then we begin to look at whether it's working correctly or not. And then we begin to say, oh yes, we should have had a policy. It will become extremely difficult, and it is difficult for us, despite what we are saying here, to be able to make a correction. I remember one time the Minister of Public Service wanted to do a reform. I hope it will succeed in the peace agreement. And she was shut down. He was shut down by colleagues, her colleagues, and people who are highly qualified, people whom we thought would understand. But coming to diplomacy, I like to really say that we are looking for, because everybody seems to be complaining about our diplomats, about our embassies, about our ministry. My colleague, Tanzanian colleague of mine, quoted me something one time. He says, you know, diplomacy is telling somebody to go to hell in such a way that he looks forward to the trip. So, are we? If you are looking for such a person, it means you bring the people you want to be diplomats, and you orient them to be able to dupe people until they damn them in hell, and they are happy about being in hell. But if you appoint them first and then try to teach them after, it will become a challenge. And that is our challenge today in South Sudan. I think the CPA, or the Compromise Peace Agreement, would give us an opportunity today, not so much to think of Vision 2040, because it's so long that some of us will say, well, am I going to that Vision 2040? We don't have a policy, a national policy, because it is from the national policy that the sectoral policy will come. And it is from the sectoral policy that a special program will come. But we have started upside down. And to me, Dr. Lual and the DPF, I'm really wondering, how do we make an input, especially in this aspect? Because, well, peace, today is 26, so we have lost 1 month. I think in the next 2 weeks, in the next 2 months, we are going to have a new government. Are we hoping that that government will take our ideas? Are we really hoping that this forum could have been a forum which produces a working document, which can be available in the public domain, so that it gives people ideas? Because we are always talking ad hoc, and we are always finding everything wrong. Each time I have come to this place, to me, everything that government does is wrong. But which is the one which is right? We need a guideline. If you don't have a policy, you cannot have a strategic direction. And if you cannot have a strategic direction, then you might as well end up anywhere. Like in 4 years, we ended up in war. I hope that after the peace, we don't end up in something more serious than war. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I thought you ago, so we hope, and this is why I was feeling that we will now have technical people to provide what we call the political parties. To send in, we have people who are responsible for economic affairs in their respective parties. Set up, and we are going to show them the outline before we start drafting. They bless it, we do the drafting in it. It is economic policy, but it's rather a strategy with costing, because everything is going to be a priority. And we don't want to repeat the mistake of the jam, which was done in 2003, 2004. We want to be careful this Center for Peace and Development, if they can team up and do that. Government also has set up its own to implement the agreement, which is fair enough. But then you need really something that is clear in those areas in the peace agreement. But you are right, the foreign policy becomes key, because this is where you are going to promote peace. Who is going to advocate it outside the country? It's foreign policy. It says, what will it bring? It will bring you the money in order to do the development. We are no longer at the stage of when we are receiving $600 million a month. We are now receiving less than $50 million a month from the oil revenues. Hopefully, with peace, production will go up, but price is something you don't control. International prices have gone down. So diplomacy becomes very important in order to attract resources, and in order to do what you don't get those resources if you don't talk about.
For the good presentation, for the chairman and all those between that embassy and the community, because the community is the one being affected, and the community also can influence the government of that country, especially for Western countries, for example. So I wanted to see something is really being taken seriously by the embassy to establish, when we talk about implementing peace or program of the developmental programs, you need the communities wherever they are around the world to be part and parcel of the policy of the diplomacy that we have here. Because, for example, if you say, I wanted something from the US, you have only 5 minutes to give everybody what you think. The peace agreement, people are saying that this peace agreement, for example, is not that good enough. I want to tell you something. You know, when you have a baby, a premature baby is a baby. Okay, but people can say that you have delivered, but they don't know how many months. What is so important is how are you going to care for that baby? This peace agreement is very fragile because it's a small baby. But yes, we will be looking after it. It needs more care, and that is very, very important. This is just one woman.
Pass it on to your neighbor. This is why we don't give you a chance.
It remarks very quickly that South Sudan is not what it is reflecting. from the statements that were given earlier, during the era of the struggle, the SPLM, SPLA had policies, and as you mentioned, Stephen Wundu was one representing our movement in the US. I had the opportunity to work in that era when we were a secretariat. And then the second era was after the signing of the CPA, and we had diplomatic mission. The third era as a state. So we always have done a lot of discussion. We have always done a lot of policy drafting. Currently, we have the South Sudan Development Plan 2040, and it's been there way beyond our independence. What I wanted to say also in reflections to foreign policy, it starts with who we are. As the man thinks, so is he. So who are we? Are we the people that were struggling for independence and still struggling for what next? Why is it that the understanding of struggling to get something is not ending, and why don't we identify who we are? Because once we identify who we are, then the statehood or the nationhood comes in place. If we have the nationhood in place, the statehood is in place, and then the policies that we've been discussing will be in place as well. And then from there, the domestic policies can be reflected as well into the international policies. In relations to today's discussion about peace and foreign policy, if we understand who we are as citizens, and then importance of having a statesman and a stateswoman, then it will be very easy for us to be able to pick up on foreign policy and adapting, owning peace. That will make it very visible for it to be implemented. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Any more, ladies?
That up to today, South Sudan has no foreign policy. And in fact, I don't know whether we are seeing it well when we are out of the government, or we see it and we are within the government. I'm asking this question. Maybe, if not all of us, 90% of us are working with the government, whether in the public sector or private sector, including the international mission that are here. They come through the government. And I said we are here to support the government, all of us. That is one. Another thing we used to say about new nation. I would like to say, when are we going to be old? It is how long do we wait to be old nation? And why are we new? Dr. Lual is here. Is he new? All of you here, Ambassador Wundu is here. Is he new? It means we're new here to us is another syndrome that is hindering us to develop. We should drop we're new, because we are old. If Dr. Lual is old, then South Sudan is old. So that thing we need not to use such that we are kept down. And maybe I will put it wrongly. Maybe those who are propagating we're new, they want to keep us under them. Okay? They want to keep us under them, such that we don't talk loudly. But I would like to appeal to all of us that we are not new. We are all like anybody who assumed to be old, because we have been with them ever since. Whether we were part of British colony, we were there. From the Khartoum government, we are there.
Thank you.
Okay, one thing, Dr. Lual, I'm from the state, and we would like to take this to the state, because whatever you are doing, it ends up in the central, and the states are dry up with the information, with the laws and all these things. This is why I want to stand a bit of time. When we talk of diplomacy, let us also have the spirit of patriotism. And that is our major problem. So when you are in diplomacy, make sure you are the interest of the whole country is within you. The image that the people of South Sudan want to be seen It is within you. That is why word of patriotism, it should be really emphasized. Another thing is self-esteem. When you are in diplomacy, you need to have that self-esteem, because you did not win because of you. You win because of us. And therefore, I will be looked into your attitude. And that is another important thing we need to encourage. Not to go far, I would like to say, such a discussion, if they are taken to the state, such that everybody is informed, and should not end here like the power. Now the power of South Sudan, it is here in Juba, and not reflected in the state. And we are making a government that is flat. When I'm seen important and disturbing, then I'm given a position within here. Another person is given position here. So we are only making a flat government where no institution that will be making decisions. But if such forum are taken to the state, then the whole citizen of South Sudan will be informed and they will participate in the decision making. The peace that has been signed, it is for all of us. And there were points of reservation, and these points of reservation, let's turn them into point of action. We have already signed the peace and there's no way. So we should make them point of action. And this is why it is important the message is taken outside, and thank you.
Thank you. Pass it on back behind.
When people talk about capacities in the government, they forget that capacities in the communities of South Sudan as a whole is what is and is affecting capacities within the national organizations that exist. Let me talk about the UN record right now says that South Sudan is more than 73%. How can you address capacities in our institutions when, in fact, our communities have very low capacities? It is the same people who end up inside national organizations. So we need to address the issue of capacity. We have to take it to the state, as our member of parliament in Bora has said it. Second to that, capacities within the international communities that comes to South Sudan.
Thank you.
I worked for USAID organizations, and when I was there, when you look at the capacity building projects had been there.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Dr. Kimo.
And since we came here, people only coach of SPLA-OE, and you are not allowed to speak something outside the SPLA speaking. Yesterday, these are the very people who say help to peace, help to the international community. Today, there are people that they will promote these policies and still giving out wrong messages. Their policies over radios are accommodated to the foreign policy. Is it controlled? This is one. Two, we have been making a lot of reshuffles. Have we seen any person who is competent in the job that he has done and he deserves a credibility to be there? Well, we reshuffle for the issue of trying to give somebody the job next. This is the issue that what Wandu was saying, that we should reflect what we look like, which is not happening. We see that when you sing the song very loud, you are taken to be a comrade. When you don't sing the song, because you are disgusted of what is happening, we are all getting ashamed. Foreigners are even asking us questions wherever we go. What's wrong with you people? But we cannot actually explain what is happening. Because every person is cartel. These people who are speaking, we only speak it here. When we go out, no one speaks about this. Condemnation. The IGAD that we are going to was our God that we wanted to be there. We say it is also fire. The UN that we are going, this America who has been feeding us. When crisis happens, we only run to the international community. What have we provided? You only wait to get relief. Do we give relief? We don't. So we must actually look at ourselves. Today the crisis was in Pibor, it moved to Malakal, it moved to Nasser, it moved to Mundiri, it moves to Ondurba, it may Come to Juba. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pass it on to your neighbor.
Yeah,
Say your name, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Joseph Hakim Gordon, working with the Ministry of Agriculture. The protocol all observed. I thank you very much for this presentation, particularly what James talks about the issue of agriculture. Indeed, agriculture, we have not been doing it quite enough because really the country lacks political will to do much. To reflect just a little, 2 years ago, we were given a budget of 40 million, and what we received only 8 million. What can you do with this 8 million? And recently, we received this 1,000 tractors. These tractors are brought without implements. How do you implement them? But these are all controversies. So, at the present moment, we are actually supposed to have 1 million ton cereal to feed the country. But we have produced only half of this. So most of the things we need to buy from out of support from the NGOs. So this is not really proper. And then we are supposed to contribute in our budget about 10% to support of agriculture. And this is not happening. So what am I saying? If you go with this speed, we'll continue actually to be beggars, begging food from here and there, will not help us. So the new government coming, I think, should put agriculture as a priority. If you don't put it as a priority, we will not really go ahead. Because agriculture actually is the engine for growth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
National Alliance. Such black spot that is damaging the image of our country in other countries. Like what happened in Egypt, the students have occupied the embassy for almost 3 months, and without any intervention in solving the problem. I don't know, where are we? And the works of the embassy is being done from the houses. And how are we running our affairs like that? This is the thing that I want, maybe they can be answered. Thank you.